Good morning. I'm harleysch from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for November 30th, 2023. Yesterday was an extraordinary day in the battle to bring about a new paradigm of peace and security for all people and all nations. And it is a battle. For too long, the beneficiaries of the unipolar order have held the upper hand, and their policy has been permanent war and plunder. But you can see this is changing, and the alternative to permanent war and plunder is taking shape. But your participation is essential. So don't be an armchair skeptic and wait for the applause of those around you before you get into action. Inspire them by your actions. And I'll give you some information at the end of this update on what you can do. But I want to go through some of the developments yesterday, which are quite extraordinary. First, there was a conference in Russia of the World Russian People's Council, and it was addressed by President Putin. What he said should be of particular interest to Americans who are reacting to the insanity of the present culture in the West. He said that a truly free person is a creator. We will support everyone's aspiration to be useful to the country, society, and people. This is what sovereign development in the national interests is made of. Now, he went on to say that a sovereign and strong Russia is essential for a stable international system. He said, our fight for sovereignty and justice is, without exaggeration, one of national liberation. We are now fighting not just for Russia's freedom, but for the freedom of the whole world. We can frankly say that the dictatorship of one hegemon is becoming decrepit, and that's a reference to the unipolar order. Now, he warned against outside interference into the internal affairs of Russia, provocations to incite ethnic and religious conflicts. We see those as acts of aggression against our country, Putin said. And he said that we will never again allow anyone to divide the only country we have. Then he said that the West has no need for such a large and multi-ethnic country as Russia as a matter of principle. And he talked about the diversity of cultures, traditions, and customs in Russia. And he said the West, on the other hand, quote, is pursuing a cancel culture policy. But this is, in fact, a renunciation of humanitarian education and replaced by some gender or other similar sciences or pseudosciences. And he said Russia will continue to advance based on looking to the best achievements made in Russia and in other systems of traditional education. Importantly, our schools and universities must be modern and open to all advanced ideas. Very clear statement of the intent that he has to allow Russia to play a prominent role in the shaping of a new paradigm. Secondly, this new paradigm was on display at the UN Security Council in a special session called for by China, as China is, until the end of today, the president of the Security Council. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was there to issue a call that China has been supporting for a comprehensive peace conference on the Middle East, and to set up a timetable for a two-state solution to the Palestine-Israel issue. And he talked about how, quote, dialogue and negotiation is the best way to save lives, unquote. He laid out a four-point plan, and here's what he said. He said that we must ensure that the current humanitarian pause becomes a comprehensive ceasefire. Secondly, that humanitarian supplies have unhindered access into Palestine, into Gaza, and that collective punishment and forced displacement against the Palestinians must be condemned by everyone. Point number three, we must begin an international peace conference as the needed path to a two-state solution. The Jewish people have their state. The Palestinians have a right to their home too. And the fourth point, and this is really important, he said, quote, it is the primary responsibility of the UN Security Council to ensure international security and peace. and it is time for the Security Council to speak with one clear voice on resolving the Palestine-Israel conflict. Now, this was backed up by virtually every person who spoke. People from the Arab world, from the global South, various organizations and institutions. Most endorsed the points made by Wang Yi, including the humanitarian pause being advanced to become a permanent ceasefire. The Secretary General of the Arab League summarized the intent of most of the speakers by saying it is the responsibility of the UN Security Council to secure peace in the region if there's going to be an end to the scenes of death, of starvation, disease, and bombardment. There are only two voices that were actually speaking against this trend of the rest of the world, of the global majority. One was the arrogant Israeli ambassador Erdogan, who said that anyone calling for a ceasefire is calling for a continuation of Hamas's Hitlerite terrorism. This is a continuing line of Netanyahu, that if you're not with us, you're a supporter of genocide, a supporter of Hitler, you're anti-Semitic, and this is an attempt to prevent the discussion from taking place. He said moving food, water, and fuel to Gaza will not end Hamas's terror. And he said those discussions about humanitarian aid will only lead to the continuation of Hamas. Now, the U.S. ambassador, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, was almost as bad, but she started by saying something that caused delegations to have to suppress their laughter. She said it's only the direct personal presidential diplomacy of Biden that allowed for the current humanitarian pause. She refused to use the word ceasefire. She spoke only about humanitarian pauses, but essentially gave a backing to the Netanyahu regime's intent to go back to war the minute the ceasefire ends. Now, the Palestinian foreign minister had some very eloquent comments, but most importantly, he said that Palestine is facing a plan to destroy it, geographically and physically as a people. Israel targets our children and then claims it is we who are teaching them hatred. We are human beings and deserve the respect of human beings, and that includes respect of Israel. Now, finally, I want to report what the Russian ambassador Nebenzia said, because these were very sharp remarks which give an indication of the thinking of the Russians when it comes to these kinds of crises. He asked the question, how many times have Western delegations requested Security Council meetings on Ukraine? The answer is at least twice a month. Then he asked, how many times have these delegations requested Security Council meetings on the Middle East? 0. For the West, the Palestinians are second-class people whose interests it is simply not interested in protecting. And he said that unless the UN Security Council makes a clear and verifiable decision on a ceasefire, this short respite will be followed by a new round of violence. And the people of Gaza, who received assistance during the humanitarian pause, will be dying again under a new shelling. Very straightforward remarks. This is just a sample of the discussion, but what you can see from this is that while the Europeans, for the most part, stayed on the sidelines, in fact, there was a NATO foreign ministers meeting where there was pledges for more aid to Ukraine, continue the war, and the Europeans were saying that in the absence of U.S. money going to Ukraine, Europe will have to step up, which of course is somewhat silly given the economic crisis hitting Europe and the fact that it's now projected that Germany next year will remain in a recession because of the economic crisis in that country. But the question that was posed to the UN Security Council is, will you do what you're supposed to do, what your mandate is, to step up and protect the security of all nations, which means a new security and development architecture, which is what the Schiller Institute has been calling for. I want to conclude with remarks from Helga Zepp-LaRouche in her weekly dialogue with me yesterday, which will be linked at the bottom of the description page for you to listen to. She was asked about, isn't there something that could be done to punish Israel, sanctions, or cut off oil and gas supplies? And she said she doesn't see that as a solution. She said, quote, either you continue to play geopolitics and you divide nations and you distribute tensions and war, or you come to a new paradigm. Our point has been that we are promoting the idea of a comprehensive development plan for the entire region. And such a comprehensive peace plan for the Middle East would then be maybe the beginning of a new development and security architecture for the whole planet, which would take into account the security and development needs of all countries, because I think that is urgently needed to get out of this present geopolitical confrontation. And that's the theme that will be discussed by the participants in the International Peace Coalition conference call this Friday at 11 a.m. Now, I've had requests from a number of you, how do I become part of this discussion process? You need to send an email to us at the following email address, questions@schillerinstitute.org. And put in the email that you want to have a link to be involved in the International Peace Coalition Conference on this Friday, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. This is what is urgently needed. While we watch as international leaders continue to fumble the ball and pull back from doing what's necessary, we need to have a dedicated, concerted effort by people of goodwill of all nations, of all religions, of all ethnic and racial backgrounds, working together for this new development architecture, which is the basis for peace. As Pope Paul VI said in his famous encyclical, development is the new name of peace. And we'll get development and a competent development project only when the people of the Western world, of Europe, of the United States, join together in a commitment to end this policy of imposing a unipolar world order by a sole superpower using military force, including NATO, to impose its will on the entire world. That era is over, but the new era is not here yet. So join us to make sure we can get to that order. So thank you for joining me today, and I will see you again tomorrow. It's Friday, so I can take your questions. Send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.